How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Boylai Hobby Time. We're headed back to the Wild West this week, but first let's get this hobby mat spick and span. I think that's supposed to mean clean, but I'm not sure why. Alright, we're ready to meet the protagonists of this adventure. This is Jack the Donkey and Bo the Prospector. The plan today is to paint these guys up all nice and slap them on a diorama, along with the terrifying creature. At this point, the creature has yet to be determined. Also, I like the look of consternation on Bo's face. I snipped the pieces from the runner and then I began the cleanup, which there really wasn't much of. These MB kits are really nice. Then slapped on some plastic cement on either opposing side that would be glued together. Then I waited a moment, and while it was a little tacky, I pressed it firmly. Seems to be the best way to do it. Also, if you press firmly enough in spots where there's a little bit of a gap, sometimes you can squeeze out some melted plastic to fill said gaps. But there really aren't that many gaps on these MB kits. Like I mentioned, these are very high quality. After the donkey, I repeated the cleanup and gluing process on the man, and off camera, I kit bashed a little forestall for Jack's back. If you're not familiar with what a forestall is, it keeps the monsters away in this imaginary universe. That's it right there with the antennas. With that, the miniatures were done, and it was time to start figuring out the diorama base that they're going to be standing on top of. I decided to go with a block of wood. The plan is to have Jack and Bo standing on the edge of a cliff with some unseen imminent danger right out of sight below them. I traced a rough outline of the cliff face and then began carving it with a rotary tool and removing a lot more material with the bandsaw. And I don't think this was the right tool combination. So the goal was to make this look like a rocky cliff face with a little cave in the middle. But I'm not super thrilled about that, so I'm going to be cutting that off and replacing it with some pre-made resin rocks. After flattening that out and getting a nice clean slate, using my bandsaw, I began gluing my rocks in place. As I glued everything in place, I would take it over to the bandsaw and trim everything down to make sure that those sides remained flush. I did that for all of the rocks except one on the top. Originally it was supposed to be some kind of an artistic choice, but I will be shaving that down before the end. Because of the collage of pre-made rocks that I used, I now had some pretty big gaps to fill. For that, I'll be using a 2-part epoxy putty. I mixed the 2 parts thoroughly for about 5 minutes, and then I went to town. And once the main clumps of putty were all in place, I shaped and sculpted everything using some sculpting tools. Once the primary shapes and forms of the rocks had been sculpted with the tools, I used more of those pre-made resin rocks to impress some texture on top. And finally, draped a large sheet over the top and sculpted on some ground texture. At this point, I was still unsure about the monster, but I settled on the tried and true horror that is spiders. I found these Starship Trooper alien legs from one of my patrons, and that helped seal the deal. I pressed the legs into a lump of putty at the back and then began forming my spider. I gave it fangs, which I made from the horns that I snipped off of Squidmar's dragon. I removed those horns when I made his dragon into a rattlesnake. The last thing to sculpt on this spider was its nasty little head. I made some divots, which I put some beady little eyes in that I made from rhinestones. And with that, we now have the monster to help tell the story on this diorama. While the putty was still soft, I impressed the foot positions of the characters that will be standing on top. The putty is going to take a nice long time to cure, so we'll set that aside for now and start painting the characters. This diorama is a part of the art challenge that I host every month for my patrons, the theme of which was out-of-place objects. If you aren't familiar with the Wild Imaginary West, a giant spider would seem very out of place in a historical diorama, but if you are familiar with the Wild Imaginary West, then the spider may not seem all that out of place. But I could tell some lore to develop the out-of-placeness, and I'll be doing that while I paint the miniatures. Jack and Bo are used to being out in the wild. Bo is constantly hunting for gold, as prospectors do, but on this fateful day, gold is not what is going to be discovered at the end of this treasure hunter's rainbow. Bo wasn't on his most discerning brainwave at a market in Alamosa last week. He was looking through used clothes at one of the stalls in the market when he found an old map sewn into the inside lining of a jacket. He assumed that this map had been owned by the previous owner of the jacket, and his imagination ran wild. He was thinking he had struck gold, so he purchased the overpriced jacket, and he immediately left the stall, being sure to hide it, wrapping it in the safety of his orange blanket. Unfortunately, he didn't get a good look at any of the other clothing, or the similar patterns embossed into their inside linings, a little trademark that the seller liked to add to her boutique restored clothing, which she charged way too much for. After Bo got to a secure spot, he looked at the map and concluded that the treasure was somewhere near Lake City. It wasn't, but Bo had gold fever, which causes connections to be made where there are none, acute confirmation bias, low impulse control, and paranoia that somebody is already on the way to take your treasure. So Bo set out right away. Just before Lake City, he took a turn at a trail that appeared to be indicated on the map. There was a big sign that read, "No forestall chain. Travelers be advised." In the wild imaginary West, the forestall chains are set up along some of the more major routes to help protect that route from monsters. This would have been him leaving the safety of that chain. Bo turned to Jack the donkey and said, "Oh, don't worry, we have a little forestall of our own that'll do just fine. Also remember, no guts, no glory." Jack didn't understand, but if he had, he probably would have kicked Bo. The truth was, the forestall wasn't very good, and they would probably not be fine. I do think Jack probably recognized when Bo had gold fever. There was probably something deep within him that let him know he was in peril. After the characters, it was time to paint the base and the spider, which by now had fully cured. And like I said before, I decided to trim the edge flush, get rid of that little nub. And then to get the whole thing nice and flat, I applied a wooden veneer. For some reason, I didn't record the veneering process. Is veneering a word? I just kind of zoned in and did my thing, but I'm happy with how it turned out. And while I paint the base and this spider, I'll continue with my story. A few hours into the hike, the trail took a left, but Bo kept going straight, because that's where the treasure was supposed to be. But they got to a big cliff and a huge ravine. And Bo imagined that the treasure was somewhere on the other side, but in reality, the ravine was between them and absolutely nothing. Bo stopped and he was puzzled, and he pondered, but never once did it cross his mind that maybe he wasn't in the right place, and maybe his treasure map wasn't even a treasure map at all. Instead, he concluded that this obstacle, this canyon, must have been unmarked for a reason, and he determined that it was to throw anybody off who was not the original owner of the map. He was not about to be outsmarted by the previous map's owner. He stood at the edge of the cliff with his spyglass, looking across, scouring the opposite side for any evidence of this treasure, which just kept growing and growing in value in his mind as the hunt went on. The forestall, which had been set to passive detection mode, began to beep. Usually there's a ramp up in speed to tell you how close or far a monster is from you, but in this case it just started up at full speed out of nowhere. Bo couldn't see a monster, and because it hadn't been beeping before, he determined it was a malfunction. He also had gold on the mind, so he wasn't really all that concerned about anything but getting that treasure. Jack, on the other hand, recognized the real danger of the situation, and he got ready to run. The last thing to do was to put some mountain tufts on the base, and after that, I called it good. Before moving on to my final shots, please take a moment to appreciate all of the beautiful artwork submitted by my patrons. A big thank you to all of the patrons who participated last month. You guys crushed it. that is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out, as always, to my patrons. You guys are the best. Have an awesome week, everyone. I'll see you next time.